One, two, three.
Welcome to Music Matters 2020. I'm your host, Jason Tramm. We're so delighted that you can join us today for our unique podcast community, where we explore the issues and challenges of classical music in 2020 as seen through the eyes of distinguished colleagues. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. Be sure to like our videos and share them on social media and help us grow this community. We exist as a resource for people who love classical music
and for classical musicians as well to document their innovations and challenges in this unique time of 2020 in the middle of the COVID era. Thank you so much for being a part of our show. Remember, you can chat in questions with our guest today. We have a wonderful guest, Mr. Jim Neglia, who is joining us from Jacksonville, Florida, and we're delighted to have him. Welcome, Jim.
It's nice to be here, Jason. Thanks for having me. Actually, this week has been really nice. It's not humid at all, so we've been hovering right around 70, 75. It's great that the hall where the Jacksonville Symphony plays is called Jacoby Theater, and right across the hallway is the Moran Theater, which is about a 3,500 seat theater, and that's where all of the visiting acts come in. So that's the hall I imagine you were in.
I've never really been there before I did my tour, and I really like that town.
Yeah, it's been great. I've been down here, this is the beginning of my third season, and one of the things that aside of the orchestra that attracted me down here, and leaving New York and New Jersey, I mean not leaving, but that very quick, rapid lifestyle, I'm turning into a little bit more of a more mellow Floridian person the past couple of years. I'm not complaining, by the way. My favorite months, the fall down is when it's like 75, 80. That's the fall. But winter, the evenings could get down to, 50-ish or even in the 40s at times. But back and the love of music and classical music at that. So it was way in the beginning. My father wanted us to all play something other than the piano, and my brother John was playing the trumpet at the time. And I remember my father brought home a trombone, which I tried to put up to my lips, and that lasted about 5 minutes. And somewhere, I think it was for Christmas 1976, I got a pair of drumsticks and a pad, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world to play away. So I started studying with this guy named Carl Wolf in Bloomfield, and lessons then were $7 a half hour, which was quite extraordinary. But anyway, following from there, I went to William Patterson, where I studied with Ray DeRoche and Ed Fay. Wonderful musician himself, and he wanted me to learn how to be a really good timpanist and really get my chops and my hands together. And by the time my freshman year had come, I had won the principal timpani chair with the Youth Symphony in New York. So I made my Carnegie debut at 17 or so, and played the Schumann Spring Symphony and some other works. Meistersinger, if I remember right. But I remember it made an enormous impact on me. And,
so you're a William Patterson graduate.
I went to William Patterson for 2 years, and after that, my oldest brother Joe came to a concert. Why I don't know how he found out. I don't remember saying anything, but one day he showed up to this contemporary concert, and we were playing a piece called Night Music by Jade Gatch. And I was playing like 30 instruments in it. Percussion's got everything all around them and so forth. And at the end of the concert, I don't know if he liked the music or didn't like the music, but he said to me, "You're going to New York next year to study at one of the conservatories." And I auditioned for Manhattan, Mannes, and Juilliard and was accepted in all. But Mannes gave me a scholarship or partial scholarship. And that was the whole beginning that's the real beginning of the career right there.
What type of connections did you make at the Mannes School that helped propel you forward as a professional artist?
This is going to sound really bizarre for me to answer that great question with a probably indirect answer, but it was the dean of the school. It was the president. His name was Chuck Kaufman, and I always thought he was my surrogate father, but as I learned later on in life, he was the entire student body's surrogate father. But the school, because it was so small, with only roughly 200 students in all 4 classes, it was they really nurtured each and every student individually. And Walter Rosenberger from the Philharmonic was there, and I was blessed to study with him. And I was really, really focusing on my classical music chops, and there were only 4 percussionists in the entire school. So you can imagine the amount of nurturing you were getting there. So that was I would never, ever trade those days for anything in the world.
Yeah, that experience being around, you must get so much orchestral experience, and have only 4 people. You must have learned a big swath of the repertoire.
Yeah, and it's funny because not only because there were only 4 of us there, I was playing for all the chorus concerts and the contemporary concerts and any other kind of new music concerts, anything that had percussion in it. I had the opportunity to play, so I got to learn all my the Haydn masses, the Teresi, and the Lord Nelson. All the good stuff. I mean, what I say, all the good stuff. A lot of the great the vocal repertoire as well, along with the symphonic greats, and that's where I met Yakov Kreisberg, who was just a monster conductor, and at the time just a few years older than I was, but he seemed like a giant to me. And we played, he was the king of Tchaikovsky for me, and so I got to play most of the Tchaikovsky symphonies with him, but we did everything from Don Juan through Beethoven symphonies and on down the road. And I was librarian in this school on top of it. So I Xeroxed all the percussion parts and timpani parts in the entire library and started to focus in on those with my lessons with Walter and later on Chris Lamb from the Philharmonic.
Fantastic. Did you stay in New York for a master's degree, or did you go right into the field?
Yeah, I did. My mother always said you have to have she really wanted a doctorate, I think, in percussion, but she was really pretty hot on a master's. And I remember finishing my undergrad, and I was really busy at the time. This is back in the 80s, like 86. Yeah, 85, 86 when I finished my undergrad. And there was so much work, Jason. There was just an unending, there was work you couldn't even possibly do. There was too much of it. But I was able to get my master's in 1 year. So it was a huge sacrifice that year because I was already performing and working outside of the school, but I was really dedicated to the school as well. And I was dedicated to learning more. And it just made logical sense. And by then, Walter Rosenberger had retired from the Philharmonic, and Chris Lamb went from the Met to the Philharmonic. And I was seeing, seniority. So I was blessed to have Chris the last couple of years of my Manus career as a teacher.
Yeah, there's a legend for you, Chris Lamb, right? That's a giant in the field.
He was a difficult teacher in a good way, but he was incredibly demanding, which I think, you have to be. And aside of having his reputation, I think that he drilled in dedication. I already had a good amount of it, but there was a different discipline that came when I left Walter and went to Chris. Walter was wonderful, but Chris was grueling, wonderful, but grueling.
That's the going to give you that grueling is going to give you the grit to go on to the next level of your career. And even today, I'm just speaking to you beforehand and hearing all the different projects you're doing. You seem like someone who's in constant motion.
Well, as we start to get into a COVID discussion, that is very true. Where anytime somebody says, Jim, where do you get all your energy from? And I really don't have a response for that, but I do feel like I'm kind of like a fish, and I need water to go through my gills all the time, so my tail is moving. And I like keeping busy. And I don't recall a time in my life where I was bored. To be honest with you, I think I've taken periods of time in the past 10 or 15 years where I said I really need a few hours just to not think about anything, and I'll turn on the tube for a while, or even reading. I can't even focus. There's some time that I need, but aside of that, the wheels they're kind of always turning.
Now, what was your first major orchestral position? What was the first one that you won?
I started off when it didn't really work that way. I'm going to go around the story quickly, but I went and I got the Musical America book, and I took a compass and I went on a map and I drew a circle with a radius of 200 miles, and then I sent out 105 resumes to various orchestras. You know exactly where I'm going with this, and out of that I got 4 positions. One was in Harrisburg, but one most importantly was here in New Jersey with a little group called the New Philharmonic. And within a few years, because I had my library skills from Manus, I became the principal timpanist, the librarian, and then the contractor. And everything morphed from there. And that's where it truly began. And so the work that I got later on was all related back to the New Philharmonic back in the 80s.
Amazing. And then it just morphed out there. So contracting has been a major part of your portfolio. How has that added to your professional portfolio?
Somebody asked me this the other day, and when hanging out with my friends down here having lunch, and this came up, and I'm not really sure exactly how it happened, but from one thing came another, as like that in life, we all know that. But believe it or not, even though I speak a lot and I'm aggressive in my own way, I'm very non-aggressive when it comes to knocking on doors or sending emails. I'm available for this, and I like things to work a little bit more organically. And as fate should have it, I went to school with a woman named Amy Anderson, who eventually married Yakov Kreisberg, this conductor I was just sharing with you. And we stayed in touch all these years. A couple of decades goes by, and our paths cross again. And she happens to be working for this person who is producing all the Zelda shows, the tour of Zelda. I mean, video games. Who cares about video games? I do, because when I met with Massimo Gallotta, he said to me, "I've got 35 shows coming up. Would you please take them all?" And when that happened, and I didn't know anybody at the time. I mean, I hope he's not listening, but I sold what I can sell, which is just Jim. But I know a lot of people as well, and I have ideas on how to do things. And I've been in the contracting world for 30 years or 30 plus years now. And Massimo took a chance with me, but I produced for him, and my negotiating skills with all of the locals throughout all of the United States and Canada really developed. I got to learn about people, and and everything was legitimate. We paid full fees and pension and all the fees that are associated with the federation. And from that, people were seeing that I was doing this, and other houses would then say, "Oh, we use this guy named Jim Neglia from New Jersey at the time." And they said, "Okay, call him up and let him do these other 30 shows, these 20 shows." And then Live Nation got in touch through another channel, and we did the Game of Thrones tour, and then the Who tour came up, and it just started to rock and roll, literally. And my orchestra life started to have a major impact as it became overwhelming to do both. And I didn't know what I was going to do, to be quite honest with you, but that's the next chapter.
It's amazing when you're in charge of making sure that those seats are filled with quality players. If someone gets sick, you're the person that's in the end got to be you're on the line.
Jason, no matter what happens on stage, no matter what city or state, it's my fault. If the E flat clarinet player forgets his instrument, it's my fault, and I'm responsible for it. So over the years, I've learned how to budget just a little bit more, like 2% above. So I always had a little bit of what I call slush money. It was very little, but if I had to buy something at the spur of the moment in Chicago or in San Francisco, it was just do it, fix it. And it would be a patch for whatever problem that was coming up.
Do you go on the road with those shows? Have you been on the road with those shows when you're
No. The direct answer is no. But what I would do is I would normally do New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, DC, maybe sometimes into Boston. But, in my 20s and 30s, I may have done more of it. But also my career as a personnel manager and a percussionist, we're still rivaling that lifestyle, and I was trying to join the two of them together, and little by little, one was, everything was starting to kind of deteriorate a little bit in the positive sense, because both were still growing, and as we started to touch on before the show began, I suffer from pretty severe hearing loss and tinnitus, which is this ringing in the ears that for me it never goes away, ever. And I know you had one of my best friends in the world on last week with Jimmy Musto, and
absolutely, Jimmy's a great guy.
He's fantastic. We're probably, I don't know, it's probably since the 80s as well. We're together. It's absolutely since the 80s. So that's a long relationship, and I would say Jimmy would often sit with me in a percussion section, and I would turn to him now and again and say, "Am I too loud or am I too soft?" Because I started to lose all the highs are gone. So if I was playing triangle or cymbals or glockenspiel or something metallic, I couldn't adjust as well as if I were playing bass drum or snare drum perhaps. But I even started to struggle with the membrane instruments, and it just got to be weird. But in the meantime, when that was kind of in a weird place, the other stuff was going through the roof. So, I think sometimes you have to follow the path. and being a performer all the years that I have, I've played in a lot of great concert halls all over the world. When I was playing a lot in the Czech Republic and Vienna and all over Slovakia, I mean, I can go on and on. So I'm glad that I had that part of my career.
Absolutely.
But when I finally decided that the change was going to happen, after crying a lot and adjusting to that, that idea of, the last thing I played professionally with the symphony was Shostakovich Five, and I played the cymbal part because I just wanted to play. I wanted to play loud and a lot. So that's the way I decided to kind of pack it in at the symphony. But it was a rough period.
And how many years were you with that symphony? It was 20 years, right?
20 years, yeah, as personal manager, percussionist.
Incredible run. That's an incredible long time. Great tenure.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. I would have stayed perhaps longer, but again, with all the things, if you put all the pieces of the puzzle that I just shared with you together, it was the logical move for me to, keep working with HBO and with these other companies who were employing me to do these larger tours and things. And it was gratifying in a lot of different ways. I was employing over 5,000 musicians a year in the United States. I got called to do this thing, Chase. This is really quickly, I got called to do this thing in Iceland. And they said, do you have any contacts in Iceland? I said, yeah, no problem. I could work it out. I hung up the phone and I just held my head like, what am I going to do?
Is there one symphony in Iceland? Maybe you'll find that one symphony.
I put in Reykjavik, right? But I put some feelers out, and believe it or not, a person in Germany knew somebody who lived there, and we put it together. And within a few days, everything was done, contract signed, and I was the hero. But it's not about being the hero; it's just about using your ingenuity, using what talents you have to get. And that's the exciting part. So instead of having to shed Porgy and Bess all day long, now my shedding is on my relationship building throughout the world and throughout the United States. So it's kind of the same thing in a way, except for I don't have to practice anymore.
It's a testimony to innovation and to overcoming challenges. Now, tell us about your work as an author. Now, you just told me you finished your third book, which has been published, and you're working on two more.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have actually three in my head, but the first book was called Onward and Upward. It came out in 2012 or 2013, and my wife said to me, I would tell her all these stories all the time, and she'd say, I really love hearing these stories, but why don't you just write them down, and why don't you just put them out there, because I think that what you've gone through is very similar to what we all go through in the arts. And we all go through periods of self-doubt where we're not good enough, or we have no confidence. And then there's a time where that confidence is built up again, and we want to share that. But we also need the affirmation from our colleagues. But in the tri-state area, to get the affirmation from your colleagues, it works both ways. If they say you are good, then they're not going to be as good. It's this whole game, it's this whole craziness. So I decided to write down a lot of these stories in a book. But as a personnel manager, I'm always documenting things. So I was able, that art of discipline through my work as a personnel manager for 20 years already created lots of stories. And I had a friend in Texas who I lost a little while ago. It was an elderly man who said to me in the 80s, Jim, you're going to have a very interesting career. You better write everything down when it happens so you remember exactly what happened. Not what you think happened a year later, but when it happens, and write details. Right, it was 65 degrees and the wind was blowing from the northeast. So it's like really, exactly what took place. Anyway, it was a great art. And the second book, it took me, I figured after I wrote one book, I'm never writing another book, because it was, after the first book was done, I suffered what I call a depression, without being depressed, but a depression of, my baby was born and now I have no energy. I don't know where to put my energy anymore. So I always thought about writing a second book, but I wanted to talk more now specifically about the arts and about my real inner love for music and for travel and for my Italian heritage. And in my second book called Center Stage, I brought all three of those elements together, or I tried to. I hope I did.
So what was the thrust of that book? Give us the information. This is fantastic.
Of the second book of
Sure.
Center Stage. You know, my 50th birthday was coming up, and I bought a journal so I could literally document every minute of. We did an eight country. I drove 8 countries. It was almost 3,000 miles, a big circle in Western and Central Europe, starting in Italy, going all the way, down and then through Croatia, and, like everywhere. I just wanted to go everywhere, but I wanted to do it and drive. And while my sons and my wife were sleeping the following morning, I would get up at 6 or 6:30, and I would go to the patio, and I'd get a cup of espresso or something, and I would document what took place the day before. And I made it my business to be very succinct in my memory and what I was writing. And that story is coupled along. Every time, I don't know if you've experienced this, Jason, or anybody listening, that anytime I would go to Europe, the day before I'd have to leave, I would go through the most miserable period where I felt like I was being stripped away from, Europe, where I felt my roots were and where I belonged, and I felt like this book brought me back there, but also tied my Italian roots and our heritage as musicians, um, through my travel, my love of travel. And those two are the main elements of the book. But in both books, I tell stories about, my Johnny Mathis jobs, or my, the other jobs, and things that went wrong or things that went right, things that went very wrong or things that went very right, and the escapade that took place as part of it. So they're both interesting books to me.
There's nothing like, I tell everyone, I joke around, I do a lot of opera, and behind that curtain there's so much wildness going on behind the stage that the audience never sees, and taking that mask off is pretty fascinating when people hear the story. So I encourage people to take a look at that first book. What's the title of your first book again, Jim?
The first book is called Onward and Upward.
Onward and Upward.
The second book is Center Stage. And then the third one, which I just finished, that came out during COVID, which we can segue into if you would like.
Sure.
When COVID hit, wow, I just got very. It hurt for a moment, even bringing this up and trying to relive last March 13th. I was in my office down here in Florida, and my boss came in. It was a good friend of mine I know from New Jersey and New York. And he said, Jim, it's time to go home. And I said, back to Avondale, Riverside, where I live down here. And he said, no, it's time to go to New Jersey. So the next morning I got on a plane, I bought a one-way ticket, and I went back home, and I closed my condo here in Florida. And I figured I was going to be home for a couple of weeks. I had dozens of dates at Carnegie Hall already booked. I had endless tours with Hugh Jackman and Game of Thrones and Weird Al Yankovic and The Who, and all this was already done. It was already in being booked. It was already done. And as the days went on, and I looked at some of my emails recently, knowing I was coming on here, and the emails, they accelerated very quickly in the feeling and the emotion of what's really taking place. And there was a lot of fear in our country. If you look at the very beginning of April, it was, the floodgates opened up of I don't want to say panic. I mean, it's for all the right reasons. There was a pandemic going on, but it became very apparent that everything that we had worked so hard for was going away. And that meant our symphony work. That meant our colleagues who are suffering now at the Met and worldwide in other, in their venues, in their orchestras, in their performing arts. My friends who do all the sound teching or do all the video editing or do all of the industry, that whole ripple, everybody got affected. And as you put so perfectly before, what does a guy do who's filled with tons of energy, and now everything has come to a halt, a screeching halt? Man, talk about hitting the panic button. I was terrified. I think like everybody else, but I know myself in a obviously I know myself, but I knew what kind of impact it was making on me may have been different from how it was impacting others. And that's not to underestimate the feeling of others, certainly, but for me, I got very dark very fast. And in the meantime, I was still running things from New Jersey down here in Florida remotely, and we were still dealing with our musicians and what are the next steps, and and what are we going to do? And ultimately, it was decided. I think it was probably mid-April, like we were canceling the rest of the season, and that's ultimately, as it did with everybody else, that's what happened. But down here, things worked a little bit differently, where we kept saying to each other, how do we open up again? How are we going to get our musicians back to work? And this was like over the summer, when May came and went, and then it was June, and June was like we were just in limbo, and like, what are we going to do? And the musicians of the Jacksonville Symphony all volunteered their time to make videos and to come together, and some of them even came to the hall. And socially distant and recorded pieces that the symphony provided assistance for. But these musicians down here all contributed, and we're so proud of them. And for colleagues of mine to hear what they were doing and to help facilitate it, it was very heartwarming, but also encouraging. So as the CDC started to come up with their recommendations on safety, we started coming up with our recommendations on how can we open our hall again. And then July 1st came, and I was furloughed for 5.5 weeks. It was like, oh my gosh, but okay, we collect on unemployment, and it could have been worse, Jason. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people, have nothing to fall back on. So for a 10% furlough of salary, I threw a party. I thought it was the least I can do. And the musicians did the same thing. All of management did the same thing. But go on. I'm sorry.
No, it's just this hit the entire industry. It's such a and it's been not just the music industry. I've got so many colleagues in the many different disciplines who are either unemployed or they're waiting for it to come back or they're watching things. It's such a unique time that we're all in.
It really is, and I feel bad for so many. My wife's business has been affected by this. Her orchestra is not working at all, and she was down with me this week. Performing with our orchestra, which I still find incredibly amazing that we're up and running. But I'd like to add, if I may, yeah, I know where you're going. I could see your body language. But I spent a lot of time on web seminars with the studies on aerosols and with my colleagues in the country and in Canada. And we came up with safety guidelines, not only for our musicians, but also for the audience and for our hall. And we all thought together, I mean, I'm talking about the Stagehands Union, the Musicians Union, our organization, our management, like everybody came together. And we would throw this document up online that was editable, like in Google Docs, and everybody would write their thoughts and ideas in. And from there, we were able to build and build. All of the musicians have agreed to come back to work in Jacksonville, all, with masks on and with bell covers. So there's a lot of research that we had to do that surrounded that, as you can imagine. We found this lovely woman out in Colorado who makes curtains for a living. This idea to make masks that have holes in them for various woodwind instruments, but their noses are still covered, so the aerosols are still somewhat more protected. Then we put plexiglass 6-foot shields around people and built little huts and houses for the woodwinds and the brass. We reprogrammed our entire season to have performances that were no more than 60 or 70 minutes in length, no intermission. No, I'm going to say this loosely, but even the bathroom stalls every other one is taped off.
Wow. I mean, it requires such a drastic rethinking of everything we've done before, but bravo to you guys for doing that, because I saw the pictures and I was so heartened. I was just on Facebook and I saw the pictures. I'm like, Jacksonville Symphony's performing a concert, and that's amazing.
But Jason, with that, the eyes of the country are on us right now, and it's not that I feel pressure for that, but I feel pressure for our musicians and our patrons and our staff, our conductor. I can't stress enough how I'm nervous about this whole thing because I still we had 582 people in a hall that fits 1,800, so everybody's socially distant, everybody's wearing their mask. There's still, to me, a lot of people, but we're doing it smart. We're doing it right. People are following the guidelines. Everybody has their temperature taken. Everybody, there's hand sanitizers everywhere. Everything you can imagine, man. And so far, we finished our third week this past Saturday, and we're still up and running. It must be working, and I found a mask for my music director that covers everything except for it's all plastic in the front, so he could use facial expressions, And then I had to get something that was anti-fogger,
Who would have thought that these would be the concerns we'd have in 2020?
Yeah, man. My concern is getting everybody back to work again, and safely.
Well, this is certainly a microcosm of everything to come because all the things that you have on the road and all these concerts are dependent on us getting a start that's safe and that protects the players and the audience.
Yeah, and maybe if we, I think about these outdoor venues that at Jones Beach we were there with a lot of our shows and other outdoor arenas. This one in Philadelphia, it's slipping my mind. The Mann Center, or even the Art Center in New Jersey down on the Parkway. Maybe there, because it's outside, you could put a symphony orchestra or a show and just sell the seats. The problem really comes to this: is that is the expense? Does the expense outweigh the income? And because people will come in droves. We opened up our hall here, and everything is just selling out. It's just people are starving for culture.
People miss live music, and they're happy to get away from a computer screen for a change.
Well, it's one dimensional, right? Here, when we're in the hall, people, even you can see their mask moving. At least it's a live person.
That's true. So we have our first question from the audience. This is Anna from Panama City, Florida, and she asks, "What did it feel like to get up on stage to play music again after all that time off?"
It's a brilliant question, Anna, and it's I speak to the musicians after the concerts, and they're 6 feet apart. Everybody's 6 feet apart, and there's shields, and the first few rehearsals, the concert was Mendelssohn Violin Concerto and Beethoven Five, and very familiar repertoire, but the first few rehearsals were really rocky. It was really challenging. Number one, the orchestra hadn't played together as a unit in almost 7 months.
Wow.
But then the distancing, first and second bassoons or the horns or whatever it may be, it was really challenging. But you know what happened, Anna? It all came together by the third rehearsal. Everybody left, and you could see smiles under the masks, and it all just kind of started to gel again. So it feels good, but it takes a lot of doing. What a great question.
And is there a way you can? Is that information that the orchestra used for reopening? Is that available? Are other orchestras using that same document?
We have a forum. We have what we call an Orchestra Personnel Managers Forum, where I get to be with all of my colleagues who do what I do, and we share a lot of these documents together. And other people are other orchestras have dynamite documents, but they don't have live audiences yet. And we actually, I think we're one of the first or one of the only that has who's doing what we're doing with our model. That's what I think is happening.
It's a really innovative and a unique approach. So. It's exciting to see people playing again, to see musicians getting back to work. Every time I see someone on Facebook who's playing a job, I'm like, congratulations. It's great to see great artists back in the field.
Yeah, of course. I feel exactly the same way. And and my colleagues down here as humans on top of it, because I know them all so well now. I know their children. I know we have a young orchestra as well, and people who had babies. I've been in 3 years. I think I'm an uncle now 7 more times. And I love these little kids, and the family has grown. But when your players as well, and I'm invested in them, to see them back together and back on stage and just enjoying making music again. I go home at night and I sleep like a baby, knowing that we've done the best we can to put everybody back together safely, and yet to make music. So it's been a joy. That part's been great.
Now, how extensive is the season to come? Is there how many performances? How many weeks of playing? How many?
We have 38 weeks, every week, contiguous weeks. I mean, we have a week off for Easter and Thanksgiving. I mean, Christmas and all, but we're playing straight through till June 15th. I mean, God willing, and everything going okay. The hard thing that we have coming up is this weekend we have vocalists, and so they'll have lapel microphones or microphones, I would imagine, and they will be inside of a plexiglass house, but they're also being tested for COVID that morning of each of the services. So we know that they're safe, and that if even the optics, we'll make an announcement before, so the audience says they know they've been tested. Now I'll tell you something else, Jason. This might sound condescending in some way, and I don't mean it that way, but something about classical music audiences. They're an intelligent group of people who come to hear the concert because they need to be enriched through music. So wearing a mask is a minor detail for them, and in order to wear the mask, they get to fill their ears and their head and their hearts with music. They have no issue with it.
Well, it's great to hear that, and that's it's great to hear all the precautions that are being taken, especially with vocalists. I work a lot with singers and opera singers, and that industry is really, I mean, it's just like all of our industries are devastated, but singers especially are really, it's a tough time for singers.
Look at the Met. I mean, the Metropolitan Opera. They've canceled the entire season, and my heart breaks. Not only for the Met. I don't mean it, but all of us. But you think about. Our Broadway friends, $14 billion being lost to the city. And don't you think the city wants to recapture that? But I understand why they can't. But it's really devastating even to think, how are we doing something? How do we share this with everybody else in the industry? But it goes so much further than that, depending on what the restrictions are in your state, in your city, et cetera. And, it's got to be like the perfect combination of things to make it work. And right now, at least, we're on the path to things working properly. And we hope that we continue along this road. We have no reason to believe we won't. That's, I guess, the message I'm trying to send.
Well, you're taking every precaution and being careful, and it's so great that you were involved. You were personally involved in the forging of that document.
Yeah, in every aspect of it. But even beyond that, musicians are creatures of habit. Me being one of them, I understand that. So when they see their colleagues, even though everybody has masks, they want to kibitz and catch up and how are you doing? And I have to kind of go backstage and say, folks, you come to work, you put your violin case down and you go onto the stage. You sit down until the concert's over and you go home. And I feel like the bad man when I do that, but in the long run, they're getting paid every 2 weeks their regular check, so we're all working, man. And that's what it's all about. We're making music and we're getting paid. And for that alone, for the time being, I'm immensely proud of our organization and our orchestra committee, the unions, the federation, everybody involved. And I was thinking about writing this up and sending it to the AFM or asking for an interview, which I think it would be worth sharing with them, and they could print it. They could put this out in print, what the Jacksonville Symphony has done.
Well, I should reach out to a representative from them to talk about this, because the idea of reopening is going to be so huge, because the entire music industry is waiting with bated breath for this information and to see what's happening in experiments. Like there have been brief experiments, like I've seen drive-in movie theaters, one in Minnesota, a couple other ones around. People have been doing drive-in opera, this and that, but it's been kind of scattershot. So this is the first, the big application of this. So it's great to hear. I think we just lost Jim Neglia's connection. We're going to get back Jim on the phone here. We're at the whims of our technology, but this is the way it goes. And
I'm back. I got you.
There we go. No problems. This is part of 2020 innovation, is technology has taken a bigger role than ever before, right? It's
sure.
Kind of dominated life these days.
Yeah. We were talking about this before as well, though. There have been a lot of horrible things that have happened through COVID, a lot of deaths, a lot of sick people, a lot of lack of good judgment, et cetera. We can go down that. But there's also been some good that has come out of it. And I think that a lot of the people that I know have become more patient. They become more forgiving and understanding. And I don't want to say they weren't caring before, but something feels a little bit bigger. Or maybe it's just the way I see things. And being separated from the world for 6 months. I mean, when I was home in Jersey, my wife and I went to a Trader Joe like once every 10 days, and that was it. Like that was our outing, and it was like a mile from home. So I don't know what it was like to go out. We didn't go out for a meal. We were just home, isolated. That's it, and that's how we lived our lives. So I think that I'm really grateful to have some human interaction in a different way. Not that I don't love my wife, but in a much bigger way. It was. It's made a huge impact on me. Person.
I think everyone has had to rethink about what's important in their lives because we were so used to being so busy and running from rehearsal to performance that all of a sudden when everything changed, we had to rethink everything. And it's, I think we approach it again with a renewed sense of purpose.
Well, this is, so the next book that I'm really, I've outlined in my head is really about, the rise and fall of the music industry via COVID. It doesn't need to be a terribly long book. 200 pages, like for me, 250 is fine. But it's more exactly what you just hit on. But I don't want it to be about the same thing that we're all concerned about, or that, we all have the same concerns, but it's got to be something beyond that, where the impact that it has made on us, never mind financially, but I'm talking the human impact that it's made. And maybe because it's impacted so many of us in the arts in a huge financial way, that it's literally changed us. A lot of my friends are leaving music and trying to find other things to do. And I respect them immensely for it. But I cry for all of us in the field. And all of the people who do all the other jobs surrounding our field as well. Anybody who works on the stage, backstage, front of house, back of house, putting booking agents. Think of all Cami. Cami just went, folded up in New York. All these.
Who would have thought that was possible? Who would have thought that's even possible?
In our day and age, come on. So it's these things that I'd like to reflect on, but what the impact was. Not in the financial sense or the emotional sense alone, but how we have grown as a result of that. And I think that maybe I would do an interview with 20 people and use paragraphs from them as a structure. I also have, you could tell I could talk a little bit, but I have a lot I'd like to contribute to it as well. But I think that would be that's a thought of mine, and it's a timely topic that I think we need something. I think I want to put my arms around this topic and share it so people realize that they're not alone in their thinking, or, it impacts us all, but there it is now in writing that they can understand in a different way.
Yeah, Jim, you have so much to say because you've been on both sides of the music aisle as a producer and as a performer, and you've been backstage in every possible way that your words carry a lot of weight, and you have a lot of stories to tell.
Yeah, it's really funny. I'll share what I know our time's probably coming to an end, but we were in Jones Beach with the Who show, and it was like I don't know how many we did, but I decided to go out in the front of house, and I kind of had preferential treatment. They knew me, the guards, and they'd let me go wherever I wanted to go. So I went like right up to the stage, and all of a sudden the whole sound system went. It stopped working. It went dead, and they're still up there playing. The Who's still up there playing, and Zach Starkey's the drummer, on that tour, but he's playing on electronic drums, so they're not acoustic, and nobody on stage realizes that there's no sound coming to the front of the stage because everybody's got the earpieces in. So I go run backstage. The audience is like shouting. Roger Daltrey comes up to me and he goes. He runs up and says, "Mate," and he puts his arms around me. "Mate, what's going on? What's going on?" I said, "Roger, there's no sound out there." He goes, "Oh, hang on. Put the bloody sound back on." And these are things that you can't even believe take place in a professional situation. But, just like we might have a problem with the interview because of microphones and Skype, they have real issues too. You know, I just thought it was one of those funny things that I think I should probably document in one of my stories.
I'll never forget that I was doing I was booking a chorus for performance at the PNC Bank Art Center for an opera, and I was backstage watching things come together, and someone had left their lapel microphone on and was in the restroom warming up. So all of a sudden you hear in the middle of the performance, like as the overture started, just loud, you know, all the vocalisms backstage, and the conductor went flying off the stage.
It's really amazing what we go through. And, you know, like in the beginning of my career, I was it. There was nobody else around. So you had to figure it all out. Now at this stage, you know, there are people who do every job you can imagine someone's attending to it. But it's funny how our early career has shaped us, you know, for later on in what we're doing now. It's really remarkable.
Jeffrey Beagle, the pianist, was on the show about a month ago, and he had this great analogy. He's like, everyone's got to find their yellow brick road. And he used that metaphor over and over again. So I kept texting him on Facebook. I'm like, I found the yellow brick road. Anyway, it's like that's a great metaphor because we all have our own road that we travel, and who would have thought that we wound up where we are? But that's just the life where life takes us.
If somebody would have asked me, you know, 20 years ago, you're going to be contracting and doing this stuff, I would have said, you're out of your mind, man. You know, and again, like I said to you a little while ago, I never made a phone call to a company. I never, you know, knocked on doors that way. I just think things happen the way they're supposed to happen in life. And I mean, listen, I've made a lot of enemies in a sense where enemies is a strong word. I've disappointed people probably in my life because of my position, not because of Jim Neglia. But sometimes when you're in a position of authority and you have to say, no, this is what we're doing, you know, there's a way to do it without coming across in an arrogant, pompous way. And that's an art. It's really, it's something in my earlier career, I wish I knew how to do better. But in my later career, I don't think I've mastered it, but I think I've learned a lot about it. And I'm very careful when I'm dealing with anybody and everybody not to offend. I'm just very careful about treating people the way I want to be treated.
So, Jim, what would you say to young artists and young musicians who are just starting out on the yellow brick road? What advice would you have coming up in this era of COVID for these young kids?
Oh, good Lord. You know, I think, and I know everybody must say this, but this is going to end one day. It will be over. It happened in, 1918, and we survived it as a nation 100 years ago. So I think that generally speaking, you should follow your heart. You shouldn't follow, I want to make money. You shouldn't follow, I have to do this, because you'll never make money in your craft unless you just want to do your craft for your craft's sake. And I enjoy doing the work that I do. I write not to sell books. I hope people buy them, but I write books because I want to write thoughts down. I contract because it's something I enjoy. And I think I wake up every day of my life enjoying what I do, or I would do something else. So my advice to especially our youngsters, you know, follow your heart and don't make it about the money. Make it about the commitment with what's inside of you. And I think that's what I could offer. If I have to look back at a 35-year career, I don't think I've had a day where I was ever unhappy. I've had unhappy days, but not unhappy with what I'm doing.
Sage advice, and I hope people take that to heart because it's some really, really great advice. And thank you so much for joining us. Jim, how can people find out more about your work and your company and your books?
Oh, this is easy. I have my website is just my name, jimneglia.com. And I have a schedule. Well, I will, when we come back, I'll have a schedule of events and concerts that are going on. But it's a very interesting website. It's not a lot of bells and whistles, but there's some cool stuff on there. My books are on there. They're in Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all that other stuff. If you Google my name alone, you'll find whatever you want to find, except for a police record, I hope.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time for joining us. We really appreciate it, and continued success down in Jacksonville.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on. And as an old author once wrote, onward and upward.
Onward and upward.
Stay well.
You too. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters 2020, and I hope that you enjoyed this show. Our next show will be on Thursday. That is at 6 o'clock, the October 8th, and we have Nebraska composer Kevin Bosiger, who's got a great career in church music and in choral music, and he'll be joining us to talk about music and the intersection of music and faith, so you won't want to miss that. Thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon, share our work on Facebook, and thank you for joining our community, and remember, keep music alive. Good night.